Welcome everyone. I'm very happy to present what we are doing on working with industries, as we say, powered with 5G, but it's not going to be only 5G. It will also be a bit of a touch of edge and some private networks in this session as well, as we see that these are some of the things we need to come together in order to help the industry on their journey towards Industry 4.0 or towards digitalization. I'm Terje Jensen. I'm heading up the global network architect team in Telenor. So we are a bit more than 60 people in all the business units. And I'm also heading up the 5G Readiness program in Telenor, which is not only looking at technology, but just as well also looking at the customer value and also the product size, perspective, and how we should build the competency and those kind of things, not only again for 5G, but also within the 5G area. So the agenda for the session I will do a short introduction of Telenor, who we are as an operator, and then a bit of a reflection on the industry approach. And the reason I will do a short update on the Telenor is that we are actually in quite a few of the markets. So it's good to have that background when we talk about the way we are approaching the industries and the way we are working. Then a couple of pages on 5G, edge and private cloud, as we see them as some of the key components which actually the industries are and the enterprise customers are asking for these days. And towards the end, walking through a couple of customer cases on more concretely what we are doing in some of the trials and also some of the commercial cases what we have already launched and with customers. Telenor in short is that we are in 9 different markets. You see the map here. It's a bit of a split between the Europe or Northern Europe part of it, and then 5 countries in Asia. So altogether, we are closing in 190 million customers across these 9 countries. And you can see the revenue and also how many people we are in total within Telenor. So across these 9 countries, we have launched 5G in 5 different countries. So they're all the 4 Nordic countries: Norway, Sweden, Finland, and Denmark, as well as Thailand. So that you find that Telenor has launched commercial 5G products there, both on the mobile broadband, also on fixed wireless access, and we will come back to a couple of more cases what we have done so far as well. So the reason for pulling up this map is that there's of course a lot of discussions about okay, so what kind of verticals, what kind of industries, what kind of customer demands, and so on we would need to serve. And it's good to have this map at least when you discuss with us, because if you look at some of these countries, like for example Norway, for example, it's quite dominated. The economy is quite dominated with oil and gas. Then there's some fish farming and so forth. So it's good to have that background. That in that market, it's quite interesting industries and a lot of customers' cases also, of course, in those categories. While, for example, just moving out to Finland, which is one of the neighboring country on Norway, you will find some electronics, you will find some chemistry and chemical productions, and you also find, for example, forestry or timbers, which is quite also important industry. And then, of course, it's interesting to see, okay, what are those needs and how are they moving forward? While, for example, in Denmark, you find manufacturing of various kinds, which is also quite important industry in Denmark. While, for example, in Thailand, you will also find agricultures. They are quite one of the biggest exporter of rice, for example. You find manufacturing, you find of automobiles and also automobile parts, for example, electronics, financials, and of course, quite a few of the other tourism is also important industry in Thailand. And then, of course, all these kind of countries, of course, you find public services, whether that's in health, emergency, they are in public offices and so forth. So that's why it's so important to have this kind of views when you talk about like an operator group, for example, like Telenor, but in quite a few of the other operator groups, what kind of markets are we actually working in? And what is the characteristics there when it comes to different industry types and different customer needs within the industries. And moving on to that, you probably have seen this within the context of Industry 4.0. On the upper right corner, you find all these generations of industries, and we are now discussing version 4.0. And there is quite a few things there associated, as you see on the right lower side as well, with characteristics what the industry and the enterprise customers and also the customers and enterprises we are discussing with, what they are actually looking for. So what they are basically looking for is to, of course, to have innovation, is to move forward themselves. It's still to be remaining in control. Definitely, it's about improving efficiency, for example, through automation. But it's also increasing safety, and we will come back to a couple of cases there. And safety meaning, for example, for human beings moving around in a construction area or in other risky, dangerous areas. And it's also quite a few cases there on compliance, where the industry and the enterprises, they have to report on how they are doing towards the government. And to do that effectively, they also would like to automate and having the different sensors in place to support those. So as you see on the, and that's summarized a bit on the left-hand side, what they are looking for, basically connectivity meaning 4G and 5G. But it's also having edge cloud, meaning cloud capabilities, much closer to their locations and their devices. It's leveraging the insight what they have into analytics, both for improving efficiency, but also for improving safety. And there are quite a few cases also, for example, in the retail industry, which are the shops part, that actually they want to use this insight into provide additional offerings to the consumers visiting the shops, for example. Then there are quite a few discussions about digital twins, that is to digitalizing the objects, and then, of course, when they had used that to further automate it to improve efficiency, for example. Everything should be zero-touched or automated, at least by humans. Of course, it can be touched by robots. And then security is very fundamental. And many of the industries or enterprises are very busy with, making sure that the information is not leaking, in the sense that it's, for example, kept within the campus area, but it's also definitely kept within the border of the country, for example. And then the interesting thing for us as an operator, and also back to what I just walked through, that this varies across the industries. The balance between these different needs, it varies over times. It's also very important to sit down and talk with specific companies on what are they actually doing right now. So we can get the traction on some of the cases, and then, of course, build on those going forward. And they are also very occupied, but even the first steps, what we are doing together, can be used as a platform for further innovation, building new use cases, gaining more value, and so forth. So those are the kind of the summary of the dialogues we have with some of the industry cases. And in summary, it's important that when we are doing this, we are not only talking about the technical solution, meaning, for example, 5G coverage and how to move and support and connect those devices. But it's also an ecosystem discussion with partners. It's a discussion about, okay, so what is the product going to look like at the end? It's also a discussion about how to go to market and how to engage with the customers. And definitely the bigger discussion about business and operating model, that is how is the money flowing, how to charge for the different offerings, and who is doing what and who is responsible for what, in particular when we talk about the partners. And we have a saying, at least in Telenor, that no one is big enough to do it all by themselves. So collaboration is clearly one of the things we are working on. That is to partner up with quite a few cases, not quite a few companies of various nature. And we'll come back to a couple of cases there. So, as I said in the beginning, there are, when we are addressing the Industry 4.0, there are at least three different technical capabilities we need to address. One of them is the 5G, another one is the cloud, and the last one is then on the private networks. And these kind of things is also what I will very quickly go through on the next couple of pages. So our 5G approach is what we call that two-track, and that basically comes from the business model and the way we are approaching the market. So the green track here is more like considering 5G as an evolution of 4G. So that will mean that 5G comes with higher capacity, higher speed, lower latency, supporting more devices, and so forth. And that we can do without changing the business model, without a major change of, for example, the skill sets within the operators and also the way we are engaging with the environment at large. Then the interesting thing, and that's what we are reading about a lot about in the media, is the blue track here, which is called beyond connectivity. So having this 5G connectivity in place, what else can we do on top of that? And then some of these things you read on the slide are, of course, on the border, like fixed wireless access in the border between connectivity and beyond connectivity. But there are quite a few interesting cases on both within the consumer market, like in smart homes, but definitely a range of cases from the enterprises. What we are engaging with them on, where edge cloud and edge computing is something, supporting robotics is something, becoming mission critical, for example, referring to emergency networks and those kind of things. And there's a lot about video and mixed reality and supporting remote controlled robots, for example, in quite a few of the cases, and definitely also e-health cases there. So what we are looking at on right now is, of course, definitely the green part of it, which is 5G evolving, and that the enterprise customers are also asking for that, higher speed, lower latency, more capacity. But there are also coming requests on what else on top of that. And I will come back to that in a couple of cases on what we are working, not only in the green one, but also the green plus the blue track there. So of course there's a timing, and you're probably seeing this 5G illustration on the lower right corner there. So we are seeing, of course, that the standardization are coming also with future releases, which are supporting both the green definitely, but also providing enablers for taking the steps on the beyond, doing more than just the connectivity. So on the edge cloud is we have a bit of a pragmatic approach to the edge cloud. We say that the edge cloud is actually where you want it to be. So we are not that religious about should it be on within the core data centers in the country, should it be just on a regional level in a country, for example, should it be all the way on the premises to the customers. And the reason is that we see customers their demands are actually spanning all these cases. So we say that, okay, we need to engage with the customers and also the partners to provide the edge cloud exactly where you want it to be. And there are different drivers, as you can see on the slide as well. Some of the drivers are on the regulatory side, that we need to come within the country border. And this is typically a characteristic of being a mobile operator, where we have to support in-country autonomy and also critical infrastructure. But we also see that there are customer demands coming on the shorter latency and also on premises, for example, keeping the business information confidential on premises. And definitely also having autonomy. So meaning that they want to have an on-premises complete mobile network, which is run and served for serving the specific enterprise customers. And on top of that, of course, it's a lot about touch-free, and it's also about self-service, that they want to have be able to control this themselves from the enterprises. So as an example of the private networks, we just have an example here, is that, of course, there are different ways to provide the private network. And from an enterprise perspective, it should look like a private network is my own network. So it's a kind of independent on what happens outside my own needs. But as all the engineers knows, there are different ways to do this. There is, and two of the extremes ones are, of course, to start building a very on-campus on a dedicated network, which is just illustrated there with those orange squares there, which will be dedicated to campuses or to on-premises for specific customers. And then, of course, we also have the public network, which are able to support the private network or a network slice on the longer term. On a specific customer needs for either a specific campus or geographical area, but it could also well be connecting devices in a wide area context. So it's important to balance these two perspectives. And we see that, of course, that the customer needs are basically coming from that they want to automate and digitalize the way they are running their business, meaning that they need to connect the devices, they need to make sure that it's security and it's fully privacy. So that means that no information is leaking out of where they are losing control. And definitely it needs to be fast and robust. A lot of these private network cases actually goes into the business critical operations. So if the network fails, part of the production it would potentially stop. So it's important to also take that so that there are a robust implementation of this private network. So this was just the three key areas. Then I will very quickly go through some of the pilots and the commercial cases, what we have been discussing so far, starting with, and this will just be a small sample on what we are doing. So starting with, for example, with the health sector, there is, and these are just showing, and in particular the health sector is showing that even though we're talking about the same industry, and actually all these cases here are even in the same country, the different customers in that industry are asking for different starting points. So the first one on the left-hand side is actually an autonomic network covering a brand new hospital building. So they are asking for an on-premises network, full-blown 4G, 5G network, which is then serving and connecting the doctors and the people which are visiting the hospital, but also storing the patient's record on the premises. So that's an autonomic network, but also, of course, with outside connectivity. Then the middle case is another health sector, again in the same country. They're asking. They have a case where they want to monitor patients, and the patients should not be required to stay in the hospital. They should be able to move around wherever they want to be, and the sensors are then regularly reporting back to the information base. And there is analytics to run on top of the information gathered, so they can trigger alarms in case there is something irregular happening with the patients, for example, and that could then trigger an engagement with, for example, a medical doctor. So that's another case on the patient, remote patients. And the third case, again within the same country and the same industry, is actually to remotely control a camera which is moving around you are swallowing it, and then it's moving around in your body. And you can remotely control that camera recording, switching on and off lighting, for example, just to see if there are any specific and very accurate inspections of the patients. So these are just three examples of what we're doing. And then, of course, 5G might be required in some of these cases. In the pill camera, it's actually asking for a 5G because of the latency to control it there. While the others could be a combination of 4G and 5G. But while we see that also edge cloud is definitely a case for the smart hospital and also for the remote patients, for example. So it's a combination of all these building blocks, what we have just been through earlier in this session. Another example is within the industrial campus, manufacturing, constructions. It's basically around putting up high definition videos, cameras, and also sensors, which are recording people movement. It's also recording objects and giving recommendations on where to find the object, where to place the objects, and so forth. And it's also on manufacturing, actually connecting tools, which are then also becoming, of course, a business critical way for customer, to the enterprise, actually. What we see in the dialogues with the enterprise is that it's very important for them that this works. If it doesn't work like this, both the efficiency is dropped and also the safety is actually getting worse. So for them, it's very business critical that these are connected, and we're also able to run the information gathering, and also the analytics and the security on top of that. So just one example of the harbor case is that there are the cameras placed on the cranes, giving real-time instructions for the crane operators on actually where to move the different containers, so that actually the container can be quickly fetched when it needs to be relocated either back to a ship or actually onto an on-ground vehicle. So that will then be recognizing the containers, understanding what is the next for the container, and so forth. In addition, it's also about monitoring people moving on the harbor area, so they're not moving under a hanging container or in any other dangerous areas. Just the last, I will do this very quickly on the last customer cases, are some of the fish farming. And as I said in the very beginning, Norway and fish farming have rather high ambitions. This will also be, again, high definition cameras and sensors placed offshore, keeping an eye on the fish, and, for example, to help feeding, but also to control the health and the growth of the fish. Then there are quite a few cases also within the public sector, could also either be in the smart city context, controlling energy or traffic, typically in the climate discussions. And we have many cases also in the emergency and defense area, where we have, for example, even an edge cloud, which are on wheels, so it's actually movable, so it can be moving around and could be build a temporary network wherever needed and wherever there is an incident or any action where we need to connect then the devices and the people who are on the site. So this was very quickly on the what Telenor is doing, how we are working with enterprises towards them on the move towards 4.0. A quick reflection is not one-day effort. It's engagement and takes some time. It's very important to engage with specific customers. The starting point might be very different. They also would like to go through and learn themselves and need to demonstrate concrete value for them. And in addition, it's also important, I think I highlighted that with the health sector, that the different customers are not the same, even though they are in the same industry. So it's important to understand that as well. But you need to engage with the customers actually to get the needs on the table, and then you could start with working with them concretely. And if you look upon all the cases, you will recognize that there are quite a few components which are similar going across all these cases. And that, of course, is one of the opportunity for most of the operators and the global players to come with those offerings, which are efficient and to work both on the technical side, but also definitely with partners and with, of course, the customers. So that was a very quick presentation from my side. Do we have any questions?
Yes, we do. So first of all, one of our attendees is asking, how far is 5G required to implement the use cases you've been talking about? And aren't they possible with 4G? And if not, why not?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. I think what we have seen is that quite a few of the use cases can actually be provided and supported by 4G. But we have also seen, and particularly when we talk about sensors, we talk about data, we talk about connectivity like smartphones and those kind of things. Most of the needs can actually be supported by 4G. Then we see that when we talk about high definition and 4K and 8K cameras, the capacity needed there actually are triggering 5G. And we also see that in quite a few of the cases, the number of devices are getting more and more dense, which is also a characteristic of 5G to support. So I think in short is that it's also one of our observations. You don't have to wait for 5G. You can just as well start with 4G for the specific cases, but there are certain requirements, particularly when it comes to high speed and low latency, where 5G has an advantage compared to 4G.
Okay, and also regarding your customers, do you charge more for low latency, or is the plan to charge more for low latency?
Yeah, that's a brilliant question, which I'm going to shy away from answering. So what we have seen so far is that of course, in the enterprise space, it's probably a bit easier because it needs to work and support a different use case what we have there.
The question meant enterprise, I think.
Yeah. So and that means that in some cases, actually 5G needs to be there. And that means that it will be part of a package. We are not going to charge in that package probably for a low latency as such, but it's for a package in total. So we have seen cases where there are the turnaround or the round trip time is so low that 5G is actually the only option. But of course, it's the customer is not, in this case, is not really asking about the technology, it's asking about a solution. And then, of course, 5G comes with latency, which is then part of the package we charge for in total as such.
So in the countries you've been talking about, do private networks have their own separate frequencies, or are you providing the frequencies you have as an operator? And how do you price for this?
Yeah, no, we have you see all the combinations. In some of the countries there are dedicated non-public licenses. We also see in some countries there are probably going to be in more countries non-public licenses, but we also are providing using our commercial public licenses for private network, for example. So that's what we see in some of the cases there. So you will probably see a mix, I guess, in the different markets.
Sorry.
Yeah.
And
sorry. Yeah, and of course it's back to the specific needs in a way, because we are solving a specific customer case need. So we put together whatever is needed there when it comes to spectrum and when it comes to base stations, network functions, edge cloud, whatever else is needed to solve the customer case there.
And are you using slicing yet?
Slicing is, as I would say, yes and no in a way, because we are not really using slicing as fully standardized, given that it's low standardization is a bit still ongoing. But we are using isolation in a kind of a pre-slicing context, if you allow him to do that. And there are ways to do that with QoS, VPNs, APNs, and there are quite a few technical ways to segregate or isolate different customer traffics, but not really in the full-blown slicing.
Okay, and what do you see is the most complex thing in getting from actual implementation for the customer's cases when introducing 5G and being able to reuse the solutions for several customers? Now, this is something I'm thinking about as well, that if each case is different, how are you going to get the economies of scale and replication?
Yeah, no, that's another excellent question, I think. So what we have seen is that, of course, there are quite a few things which goes across all the cases, like connectivity, for example, and then talk about 4G and 5G, for example, on base stations, device management. You find a core network, a transport network. You find also cloud components here, which are common, for example. You find security requirements, which are common. You find the need for doing some kind of analytics, gathering information. The digital twin is to some extent, or digitalizing objects is to some extent common, and so forth. What are quite different in some of the cases is actually the devices themselves. Because they might be integrated with other kind of devices, like, for example, a crane is on the harbor is a crane, and then of course the crane is connected, but it needs to be integrated with the control system for the crane. It also, the applications themselves tends to be tailored, like the medical cases. These are tailored to analyzing the patient's monitoring, for example, the ECG or the heart rhythm. So the applications are typically, to some extent, also tailored to the use cases. But there are quite many things which goes across, for example, as I said, connectivity, security, analytics, operations. There are quite a few things which are common, and then also, of course, potentially for scaling.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think that was a great session, really informative. Thank you so much. And we'll see you again soon, we hope.
Yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Bye.